Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping right into the heart of Ethiopia, pulling out some key insights and, frankly, some surprising stories straight from the recent pages of Addis Fortune. As you know, it's the nation's largest English weekly, and we've got a great stack of articles here. We're looking at everything from big economic shifts, what's happening in Addis Ababa, the human side of policy changes, even how Africa's fitting into the global picture right now.
Exactly. And our goal today is really to unpack what all these stories taken together tell us about Ethiopia's transformations. You know, the challenges, the opportunities. We want to connect the dots for you, hopefully give you a few of those aha moments along the way.
Absolutely. So looking at the headlines recently, what's really jumping out at you? What feels like the biggest story right now? Okay, let's unpack this. Well, for me, it has to be this truly historic moment.
Right.
The official launch of the Ethiopian Securities Exchange, the ESX. I mean, for a country that's relied so much on external money, this feels huge. What's the real significance here? What's it signaling?
Oh, it's massive. More than just a new stock exchange. It's a statement, a real declaration of economic intent. You heard officials like Governor Mamo Meheratu, Finance Minister Ahmed Shide. They're calling it a strategic necessity.
Right.
It signals Ethiopia wants to finance its own ambitions, not just rely on donors or soft loans anymore. And seeing Gada Bank and Wigan Bank executives ring that bell, launching screen-based trades of treasury bills, that was quite something.
A powerful image, definitely. But let's bring it down to earth. What does this actually mean for, say, the average Ethiopian? Or for a local business trying to grow, trying to raise capital? What's the tangible effect?
Well, initially the focus is narrow, right? Trading government treasury bills. Officials are pitching this as a positive yield alternative. Better than just aid or taxes, they argue.
Okay.
But the bigger picture, the long-term vision, Hana Tehelku at the Capital Market Authority talked about this. It's about building confidence. Confidence for companies to issue their own bonds, maybe even equities down the line. It's the ultimate goal. To get household savings, institutional cash, channeling that money into development projects, into the state coffers, mobilizing domestic resources.
But like any big change, there must be doubts, potential pitfalls. What are the skeptics watching for? What are the big question marks hanging over the ESX right now?
Yeah, definitely. Skeptics are keeping a close eye on the operational side. Simple things like, will the trade settlements work smoothly? Any glitches? And then the bigger question, is there actually enough investor appetite? Will people buy in? That first afternoon felt like a big step, sure, but the real test is sustainability. Will it function consistently, attract broad participation over time? That's what everyone's watching.
Okay, moving on from the ESX, but kind of related. There's this recurring theme in Addis Fortune lately about policy volatility. Feels like we're seeing quite a few head-spinning U-turns. What's going on there?
That's a really sharp observation. It's definitely a pattern. The Franco-Valuta scheme is a perfect example, isn't it?
Remind us what that was.
Right. It was an attempt to liberalize foreign exchange. Let importers pay suppliers directly in hard currency. Seemed like a good idea. Lots of initial optimism.
Yeah.
And then, bam, slam shut, apparently due to unspecified pressures. Just like that. And you had ships literally stuck at sea. Businesses left completely scrambling.
Wow. And it wasn't just that one time, was it? We saw something similar with the push for electric vehicles.
Exactly. That whole situation with the automotive industry. The industry ministry says, go EV. Then the transport ministry bans petrol and diesel imports, even hitting things like vital farm machinery.
Until they had to backtrack.
Until they were forced to reverse course, yeah. It raises serious questions, doesn't it, about deeper institutional issues.
Like, what do the articles suggest is behind this?
Well, they point to things like a sort of muddled federalism,
Yeah.
Where regional bureaus might just ignore federal directives or do their own thing. And the courts, they seem limited. The Supreme Court apparently can't strike down unconstitutional laws. So if officials just, rip up agreements, there's not much legal recourse for investors. It's a real problem.
That sounds incredibly unstable. So what does that kind of unpredictability, that legislative whiplash, actually do to the economy, to investor confidence?
Well, the impact is pretty severe, as you'd expect. When rules change without warning, businesses just. They put expansion plans on hold, banks get nervous, they tighten lending, foreign capital, it gets spooked, it looks elsewhere.
Creates a bad cycle.
A vicious cycle, exactly. And here's a really striking detail from one of the pieces. Apparently 60% of foreign ventures make it from licensing to actually operating, But for domestic projects, only 5%.
5%. That's tiny.
It suggests local businesses have a much harder time navigating their own country's system. It's quite the paradox.
And all this turbulence, it feeds directly into the situation with the burr, doesn't it? The brood buck, as the paper calls it. We're seeing this slow retreat against the dollar, even while the central bank's auction window stays shut. It feels like reforms intended to help are maybe hurting ordinary people right now.
Well, that's the tough reality, isn't it? Floating a currency, even partially, it might be necessary long-term, but without the right safety nets, it can unleash serious pain. We see commercial banks like Oromia Bank letting the burr slide against the dollar. That's the market speaking.
But the state bank isn't moving.
But the state-owned commercial bank, CBE, is holding firm, keeping its rates fixed, almost like a deliberate anchor, as one article put it. It creates this split in the market. It's fascinating but worrying.
So you have the official rate here and the market rate drifting over there. How does that usually end? Is this a unique situation for Ethiopia, or are there lessons from elsewhere?
Analysts are pointing to the usual suspects driving this gap. Strong demand for imports, everyone expecting the central bank will have to adjust the official rate eventually.
Right.
Delays in getting loan money and aid in, plus just speculative buying, people trying to get ahead of a devaluation. And while floating the burr was seen as this overdue correction, the issue, as one anonymous writer highlighted, is that it happened without a big safety net. No clear path towards an inflation-targeting central bank, for instance.
And the immediate impact on people's wallets.
It's cost-push inflation, plain and simple. Prices for essentials, TEF, cooking oil, minibus fares, they're just skyrocketing. But paychecks, they're not keeping up.
That's tough.
It is. And the finance ministry itself is warning that just paying interest on debt could eat up over half the federal budget soon. It really underscores the point. Currency reform isn't magic. You need solid policies around it, and crucially, political stability for it to work without causing chaos.
Okay, let's pivot now to Addis Ababa itself. Huge news there, too. The city approved a record budget, 350 billion birr for 2025-26. And the really remarkable thing, it's supposedly the first time ever it's running entirely without federal money. That's bold.
It really is a turning point. That's the phrase Deputy Mayor Abdulkadir Redwan used. It's incredibly ambitious, aiming for self-financed growth, relying on aggressive revenue collection and big infrastructure plans.
Aggressive revenue collection.
Yep.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah. And over 70% is for capital projects, including, interestingly, 177 billion birr for projects meant to help low-income residents. So there's a social component stated there.
But is it realistic? A budget that big, growing that fast, and cutting ties with federal funding? Mm-hmm. Are people worried it's too much, too soon? What are the risks?
Oh, absolutely. There are definite concerns. Samuel Kiffel, acting dean at Addis Ababa University, he raised red flags about things like off-budget spending, city agencies taking out foreign loans on the side.
Hidden debt.
Exactly. He warned that unchecked borrowing could strain the city's balance sheet. Plus, there's criticism about how little is going to innovation, just 4.9 billion birr, and what some call a woefully inadequate amount for job creation, especially when Addis has this massive housing shortage, like 1.2 million units needed. So big vision, yes, but big questions about execution, too.
And you mentioned aggressive revenue mobilization. Part of that seems to be this major overhaul of rental taxes, targeting 500,000 property owners. That sounds like it would affect a lot of people. What's the goal?
The idea is to bring transparency to the housing market, which, let's be honest, is largely informal. The new rule says landlords must register every lease, and all rent payments have to go through banks or digital systems. No more cash under the table.
Right.
And the interesting mechanism is this presumptive tax. Most landlords won't have to track every little expense. They'll just deduct a flat 35% from their gross rent before calculating tax.
Sounds simpler, maybe. But what's the reaction been? Formalizing sounds good on paper, but is it causing problems on the ground?
Well, authorities say it's overdue, tackling underreporting. But yes, there's been backlash. Landlords are worried it's just too much paperwork, too burdensome, especially where banking isn't easily accessible.
Right.
Plus, there are fears about being hit with penalties for past years, retroactively. And the big worry for tenants. Will landlords just hike rents to cover the tax, or pull properties off the market altogether?
Displacement risk.
Exactly. One tax expert basically said they need much clearer guidelines because all this ambiguity could cause confusion and resentment.
Now, still on taxes, but shifting slightly. The city also scrapped the VAT, the value-added tax on basic vegetables like onions and potatoes. That sounds like straightforward good news for consumers trying to cope with high prices, right?
Well, it's definitely being sold that way, a relief measure. You know, formal shops like Fresh Corner, they used to sell onions for 88 birr, including VAT, while little kiosks sold them for 70. Now Fresh Corner says they'll drop prices, maybe by 13%.
So some relief there.
Some, potentially. But for the smaller shops, it's actually more complicated. Many of their suppliers don't give proper invoices. So for these small guys, complying formally with the VAT exemption, even though they don't charge VAT, could actually cost them money and hassle.
Unintended consequences again. And what about the bigger picture for the government? VAT is a huge source of revenue, isn't it?
It's massive. VAT is now the federal government's single biggest tax stream, over half of all tax receipts. So exempting vegetables, even basic ones, is a bit of a gamble.
A calculated risk, as the article put it.
Exactly. They hope it helps food security long term. But experts worry it'll make tax enforcement harder. You know, intermediaries could game the system, pocketing the difference, so revenue might leak and consumers might only see small price drops anyway. And it also highlights that paradox. VAT is fundamentally regressive. Poorer families spend more of their income on food, so they effectively pay a higher rate, even with some exemptions.
Let's shift to something more personal. But it feels systemic, too. One of our opinion pieces really hit home, describing dealing with bureaucracy as being lost in a labyrinth where logic falters. It sounds painfully familiar.
It really resonated, didn't it? The author shared these hard lessons about putting off official tasks, like trying to get a birth certificate years later and finding the hospital records gone, or facing endless queues and lost files just to get a university degree back. The takeaway was stark. Staying ahead of bureaucracy isn't about efficiency anymore. It's basically a strategy for survival.
Yeah.
You have to anticipate the system's failures.
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
But it's not just delays, is it? The piece also talked about constantly changing rules, inconsistencies. How does that play out day to day?
Right, like suddenly needing both the old Cabale ID and the new digital FADA ID for something basic. It just creates confusion, contradicts the original point of the new ID, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or the push for cashless payments. Officially encouraged, but then you go to an office and it's still cash only. It creates these practical headaches. It really suggests this disconnect between policy pronouncements and the reality people face. Citizens have to be meticulous, but the institutions often seem inflexible.
Okay, let's wrap up our focus on Addis with something you can literally hear. The noise. That constant soundtrack, loud music, honking construction. One piece called it the city that refuses to hear itself. What's the significance of all that noise?
It's a really powerful metaphor, and the data backs it up. A study back in 2014 in Mercado, a notoriously busy area, found daytime noise levels routinely between 62 and 84 decibels, peaks over 100.
This is like a rock concert level, right?
Yeah.
Way above the limit.
Way above the supposed limit of 65 for commercial zones. And the scary thing is, constant exposure to that level of noise, it's linked to real health problems. Insomnia, stress, heart disease, even lower productivity. It's not just annoying, it's harmful.
So, beyond the health impact, what does this noise symbolize about the city? What's the deeper message?
The author argues each layer of noise points to a gap in the civic machinery. Generators roaring because the power grid fails. Constant honking because traffic isn't managed well. Construction noise maybe because rules aren't enforced.
I see.
The zoning codes, the noise limits, they exist on paper. But enforcement, it whispers, as the article put it. Only 13% of businesses flagged for noise actually face penalties. So it becomes a symbol of a city growing fast, but maybe not managing the basics, not ensuring public well-being.
That final thought is provocative. A city that speaks many languages, but maybe needs to learn to listen.
Exactly. A powerful call for better governance, better quality of life management.
All right, let's broaden our view now, moving to connectivity. Ethiopia is pushing this ambitious logistics corridor, multimodal, linking Ethiopia, Djibouti, China. Sounds like it could be a game changer for trade in the region.
It absolutely has that potential, yes. You've got Ethiopian Airlines, Customs, Huawei, SafeSon Logistics, all backing it. The goal is pretty impressive. Cut shipping times in half, lower costs, get around those notorious infrastructure bottlenecks.
How does it work exactly?
Goods come in by sea to Djibouti, get transferred onto bonded trucks, driven to Addis, and then flown out from there. It's designed to speed up high-value stuff, electronics, medicine, that kind of thing.
Sounds efficient on paper. But are there bumps in the road? What are the early challenges showing up?
Oh, yes. Despite the promise, the early rollout has hit a litany of challenges. One example really stood out. Just getting the legal paperwork for a single customs document sorted during the pilot, apparently it took up to 2 months and cost $2,000.
$2,000.
Yeah.
Just for one document. That's not sustainable.
Not at all. And industry folks like Teodros Casahoon are also warning about new rules capital requirements for logistics firms, especially after fuel subsidies were cut. They worry it might squeeze out smaller Ethiopian companies and favor the big foreign players. So, potential, yes, but hurdles remain.
Now, tied into trade and technology is this global push for technological sovereignty. We see countries everywhere trying to control their own tech future. How is Ethiopia playing in this space?
It's a really interesting dynamic. Globally, you see it with semiconductors, 5G. Countries want control over the core tech for economic reasons, sure, but also national security.
Right.
For developing countries like Ethiopia, it's also about creating jobs locally, generating value, building resilience long term. You see Ethiopia making moves like the AI Institute partnering with the federal police for a smart police station, using AI to modernize law enforcement. That's a clear signal.
And is this digital push showing up elsewhere in everyday business?
Definitely. It's not just government projects. We saw Currenti Auto Trading and Age Legal Microfinance teaming up. They're offering financing for EV buyers, which supports that whole clean transport goal.
Okay.
And there's a new business platform, Zurier. It links up Ethio Telecom, Dashin Bank, ETT Solutions.
Sure.
Basically helps businesses generate official receipts automatically for the tax office. It's all about modernizing, automating, formalizing.
But is there a danger here? When countries chase tech sovereignty, could it slide into protectionism, harming collaboration?
That's the warning, yes. An expert from Project Syndicate made that point. Chasing sovereignty shouldn't mean closing yourself off. The trick, maybe like the EU is trying with its Eurostack, is to set your own national tech priorities, but stay open to international partnerships. It's a balancing act, national security versus economic openness.
As the economy modernizes and reforms move forward, robust oversight becomes crucial. How are governing bodies trying to ensure stability and transparency, especially in finance?
Well, the National Bank of Ethiopia, the NBE, they recently held a big forum focused on their bank supervision application, the BSA system.
What does that do?
It's basically software developed with other African central banks to automate how they supervise financial institutions. It shows the NBE is trying to use modern tools to cope with all the new complexities, cybersecurity threats, fintech, global uncertainty. It's about keeping the system stable and competitive.
And what about cracking down on illegal activity? We saw some action in the fuel sector.
Yes, that was significant. The Petroleum and Energy Authority disciplined 13 fuel companies. They were caught trading millions of liters of fuel illegally outside the official digital tracking system.
What were the penalties?
6 got suspended for a month, 7 got final warnings. It highlights the ongoing fight to monitor distribution properly and stop fuel ending up on the black market. It really reinforces why they need these formal digital systems and why enforcement matters.
Beyond the big picture stuff, Addis Fortune also covers these very local grassroots development efforts, like the Lowland Livelihood Improvement Project in Dodi Town.
Right, those stories are important too. This project, about 10 million birr, built a new livestock market center. The idea is to bring all the scattered trading into one place, make it more efficient.
And did it work?
Well, the article highlighted some promising results. Nearby better poultry farming, beekeeping, irrigation projects linked to the overall initiative. It shows tangible improvements happening on the ground, affecting people's livelihoods directly. And it raises that question, how do these small successes feed into or get supported by the bigger policy shifts we've discussed?
Now let's talk about a story where policy and livelihoods collide in a really difficult way. The crackdown on traditional telebars in Addis. This seems to have hit people hard.
It's a really tough situation. Officials, particularly from the Wareda Peace and Security Bureau, are saying it's purely about security. They claim these places are brooding grounds for crime.
So they just shut them down.
They closed 11 licensed teller and Aikai spots, confiscated drinks, and basically told the owners, change your license to food only. No more traditional drinks.
But what's the human cost? We heard some devastating stories from the owners, didn't we?
We did. People like Isabalu Udain had to dump 12,000 birr worth of tella because it spoiled after he was shut down. He's facing ruin, his employees lose their jobs, his family back in a conflict zone depends on him.
Heartbreaking.
And Tajala Endale, similar story. Lost inventory, still has to pay rent on a closed business. Officials might say, oh, we're not saying they're illegal, but the message is clear. relocate, or change your business. Trade Bureau Communications Director Ashanafi Burhanu was quite blunt. Peace and security have no patience.
So security concerns versus livelihoods. But this isn't just a few bars, is it? Tela is a huge part of the informal economy.
Absolutely massive. Ethiopia produces something like 2 million hectoliters of Tela a year. Think of the whole chain. Grain traders, transporters, the women who brew it, potters making the jabinas, the workers in the bars.
It supports a lot of people.
A huge number. And legal experts like Abdurazak Nestro argue these blanket closures are unconstitutional, violating the right to work. He said people are just accepting maladministration in silence. It really forces that question. How do you balance regulation and security with people's fundamental right to earn a living? Especially when you're shutting down a sector that was actually seen as a success in terms of getting businesses licensed and formalized.
Okay, let's zoom out again for our final segment. Looking at Africa's place in the world, one Project Syndicate piece we featured argued that the BRICS Plus group needs to seize the Africa opportunity. What's the core idea there?
The argument is that BRICS Plus nations, especially the African members, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, they understand Africa's historical, economic, and political challenges better than traditional powers might. China is already the continent's biggest trading partner.
Right.
But Africa still faces enormous hurdles. Lack of energy, crushing debt, the impacts of climate change getting worse.
So how can BRICS Plus help? What kind of partnership are they suggesting?
They argue BRICS Plus needs to be more than just lenders. They need to be co-investors. For example, help Africa build its own clean energy manufacturing, tapping into its huge renewable potential. Not just extracting resources, but building capacity on the continent.
And debt.
Debt relief is key. China has already forgiven some debt, showing it's politically possible. The idea is a more strategic, collaborative approach that could redefine development finance and strengthen geopolitical ties, moving beyond the old donor-recipient model.
And related to that, another really striking Project Syndicate piece framed the high cost of borrowing for African nations as nothing less than a public health emergency. That's a strong claim.
It's incredibly stark when you look at the numbers. Africa has almost a quarter of the world's disease burden, but gets less than 1% of global health spending. High-income countries borrow at, say, 2-3%, African countries, often over 10%.
That difference is huge.
It forces impossible choices. Pay back loans or buy medicine, hire doctors or service staff, build clinics or pay interest. The article puts it bluntly, the cost of capital costs lives.
Wow. Can you share some of those specific examples that really illustrate this?
Sure. In Kenya, there was a project that brought in high-tech medical gear through a public-private partnership. Great idea, right? But the country couldn't actually afford the buildings or the trained staff to use the equipment effectively.
So the equipment sat idle.
Or was underutilized. And in Ghana, nearly 3/4 of the health budget is now just going to pay salaries. That means critical shortages of things like anti-malarial drugs in rural areas. Families face terrible choices, skip treatment, fall deeper into poverty. It shows aid alone isn't enough if the underlying finances are unsustainable.
So what's the way out? How can Africa build health systems that are resilient and not so dependent on aid or crippling loans?
The authors say tackling the high cost of borrowing has to be a top priority, especially at global meetings like the G20. That means fixing structural issues, outdated regulations, biased risk assessments that penalize African countries.
And specific mechanisms.
Things like more timely debt relief, innovative ideas like debt for health swaps, where debt is canceled in exchange for health investments, or pause clauses so debt payments are automatically suspended during emergencies like pandemics. The core message: African health shouldn't rely on charity. It needs fair financial structures.
Shifting gears one last time to something more philosophical perhaps, but deeply relevant, a commentary reflecting on collaboration, inspired by a 19th century painting, L'Atelier de Basile. What can an old painting teach us today?
It's fascinating, actually. The painting shows this shared artist studio. You have Basile, Manet, Renoir, Monet, all working together, interacting. Manet even painted part of Basile's figure in the artwork.
Really?
Yeah. It captures the spirit of unplanned cooperation, mutual trust, shared space, conversation. Not just artists, but a musician, maybe a writer, too. Different people sparking ideas off each other.
That sounds ideal. How does it contrast with today?
Well, the piece contrasts it sharply with modern work life, often isolated in secluded cubicles, or just seeing colleagues as squares on our computer screens. It asks, how can we expect creativity and problem solving to flourish without environments that encourage that kind of real human engagement?
So the lesson is about creating better spaces.
Creating spaces physical and metaphorical built on trust, openness, resilience, whether it's in schools, offices, even government, especially for tackling huge challenges like climate change, where you need diverse perspectives working together effectively. We've lost some of that art of collaboration, the piece argues.
And finally, a really touching piece about a couple celebrating 50 years of marriage. Not just a personal story, but offering wider lessons about resilience and commitment.
Yes, half a century of impact. It wasn't about romance in a fluffy sense. It was about sheer, unshakable commitment, service, and faith, often through serious financial hardship. They made a choice, an action, chose love every single day.
Consistency is quietly radical. I like that phrase.
Me too. And the deep respect they showed, never speak ill of each other, always preserving dignity. It's a powerful example of enduring partnership. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you a clearer view and some new insights to consider.